cafes as the year goes on, and I'll come to that at the end. But I'm just going to pick on somebody completely random to start chatting about what they've been up to, what's happening in their world, and what they want to chat about. So Ranald, over to you.
Hi Jenny. Yeah, no, it was just probably you know, one of the things that I'd mentioned maybe in the Rural Islands Transport Group LinkedIn kind of forum, if you like, was infrastructure projects, I suppose, and I'd mentioned about the
I'm not being
likes
rude.
of,
Somebody's trying to get in, so I'm just trying to email them back to let them in. So I am listening, but I'm not being rude. Keep going.
No, you're fine. And I mentioned the likes of R100, you know, the Calmac ferries, Rest and Be Thankful, and I suppose across those infrastructure projects, you know, a number of them now are going to be years overdue, or are years overdue, if you like, and vastly over budget. And I suppose the kind of question is, you know, about our skills and expertise in respect of kind of managing and delivering some of these infrastructure projects. There's been quite a lot of underinvestment, well, as everyone kind of knows, in some of our regions in Scotland, and as has been kind of, you know, you can see from looking at the Infrastructure Commission reports as well. So when you do get some of these infrastructure investments, and when they do end up being several years overdue, and significantly vastly over budget, you know, it does raise a lot of questions. Certainly in Argyll, I think the Rest and Be Thankful, which has cost in the region of, I think it was 79.2 million, you know, was kind of suggested since maybe 2007, digging these pits, and they've still not ultimately solved the problem. So you've kind of got two routes: the main Rest and Be Thankful, and then the military road, which is a secondary route. And it's just, you know, there's a lot of frustration there, I think, you know, within Argyll, not just about the lack of investment, but when there has been investment, as I say, these things are not working out very well. And I think the interesting thing as well is there was a technology report earlier this week in terms of the technology ecosystem in Scotland that Mark Logan, ex-Skyscanner, has written, and it talks about a number of things really, where maybe, you know, the international benchmarking is not what it needs to be. He doesn't say it in so many words, but you know, what it needs to be in Scotland. And I think that, you know, we do need to kind of reconsider how we manage and deliver some of these infrastructure projects, because it's just really not working at the moment. So
I'm sure loads of people have got comments to come back on that, and Mr. Yellowlees probably does. But you'll be glad to know, Ranald, that one of the sessions for the convention is actually going to be talking about infrastructure and connectivity. So that will then obviously give us an output for Transport Scotland and the Scottish Government at the end of it. So we can use it as, without it being a moaning platform, we can use it as being constructive, if that makes sense. But anybody else want to contribute?
Jenny, it would be impossible not to say at this point something about the truly dreadful weather of August, the shocking damage, well, in Argyll and in other places. The Edinburgh-Glasgow Railway destroyed, 300 metres washed away after the Union Canal burst its banks. We really are seeing climate change with a vengeance, and this would be, and then the tragedy at Stonehaven, where first fatal railway accident since 1994 in Scotland. These things would have had bigger headlines if it wasn't that the BBC spends every hour of every day talking to academics about COVID. We really have seen shocking impacts of climate change during August.
I totally agree, and I don't think there's going to be anybody on the call here that hasn't been inundated at some point with messages. Well, I was anyway. I hope you weren't on a train, was what I got quite a lot of. And did you know anybody on the train? And that was just horrific. And when you're starting to promote rural mobility and wanting people to use a train, you want trust, don't you? And I know it's only been 30 years, but 30 years is a long time since an accident's happened, but we need to gain that trust back. So infrastructure is a massive thing. Anybody else wish to put their comments forward?
I had a question, really. It was about whether you thought that like some of the overrun or some of the overspending sort of came from like the tendering process of actually getting those jobs out, where people are effectively slightly underbidding so that they can get the contract, and then just escalating it after they've got the contract, because that's the actual cost of getting that program done.
Matthew, I was going to get you to introduce yourself because I know you're new to the cafes, and this is our new format for some of these, so fire away.
Yeah, okay, nice to meet you. My name's Matt. I work for a startup out of MIT, so I'm new to all of this. It's nice to meet you all. And looking forward to getting to know you all.
Thank you for joining us. Sorry, I'm eating cake. Bad moment to stop talking. Anybody else want to jump in?
I just wonder whether or not it's perhaps something come a bit more basic, just about skills and capacity of the sector. So obviously, kind of last couple of weeks, down south here down south for the border here in England. There's obviously a big announcement made about kind of this new acceleration unit within DFT about trying to speed up infrastructure projects and trying to kind of deliver at a faster pace post-COVID. But then at the same time, we have a massive skill shortage in engineering, and actually we literally do not have the capacity in order to build these things. I mean, we've just kind of seen it in the last few months, where obviously there's been a welcome investment in active travel, but the local authorities are now really struggling to deliver it, and their contractors are struggling to deliver this scale of work. And so whilst obviously, kind of takes time to kind of replace these skills, it is literally just the fact of we just haven't got the capacity in order to accelerate these projects. And it's probably become much more of a long-term thing we've got to think about. I know that Alex may have been involved in some work just done it when I was at Transport Systems Catapult about skills in transport technology, and it said there's about a shortfall of about 1 million jobs or something like that, or 1 million skilled people. And it's how can you then overcome a barrier like that? And it's not an easy solution.
I'm going to ask Maggie, because we're talking about skill here. We're also talking about volunteers. And last time, Maggie, you were saying you were quite inundated with volunteers. Is that still the case for you need to give some background to who you are. If everybody can introduce themselves, because not everybody, there's some new people that are around. And we've also got Shetland that's joined us. So hello, Rabina. So if you just do a quick who you are before you start chatting the first time, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Maggie Lawson. We have I work in the area of Badenich and Strathspey, which is in the Cairngorms National Park, an area of about 900 square miles with lots of rural issues, people being quite dispersed off of main roads. So there's a severe lack of public transport in our area, and school transport can be very difficult as well. I see Fergus was asking about community-led shared transport schemes in rural area. We have a community car scheme that we operate with a lot of volunteers, but COVID has had a huge effect on us. We've had to stop running, obviously, the car scheme just now, but we were trying to get in touch with all our volunteers to see would they come back. And I reckon we might lose probably about 60% of them. And we had about 120 or 30 drivers. And I think the fear of these spikes that are coming back has frightened a lot of people off. But we've written to them all, said what we're trying to do. We've given guidelines, but we've actually asked them to sign a disclaimer. And I think the disclaimer has frightened people. So from having hundreds of volunteers, 300 volunteers came forward in Aviemore alone to support COVID and lockdown. That has just totally disappeared with people going back to work, or just people lost the buzz. So it's become a big problem again.
Anybody else got similar or any suggestions to help? Silence. Deafening.
I have, I've sort of caught the tail end. Can you hear me okay, Jenny?
Yeah, Wendy, can you introduce yourself briefly, please?
Hi, I'm Wendy Pring. I am a chartered civil engineer, and I've just exited my own business, which was in sort of waste management, circular economy, and I am setting up a new company, the Way Forward 2045, looking at mobility as a service and how we can start to look at autonomous vehicles and that whole, the thing that everybody else is talking about, the sort of properly looking at it as a service, that is a business that creates solutions. Not getting terribly far for all the reasons that everybody else has sort of brought up here. I think the one area where I think that the previous chat, Ronald was mentioning about Argyll, and I'm going that by your name, sorry, it might not be your name, but I have actually, through one of the other positions I'm in, SCDI, as the chair of the South of Scotland, I've managed to get the 5G Centre, OpenReach, BT, and the director of Ofcom Scotland, Glenn Preston, to agree to a round table to do just this, to support how the connectivity needs to improve, but looking at local delivery, because it's very clear that as he said, the R100 programme's already 12 months round, and one of the people that I've just mentioned, they openly said on the calls that we've had that even though it's called R100, they know it is not going to cover anywhere close to R100 when it comes to the rural situation. So when they said that several months ago, I said, well, how can you come and sit and help our members in the south of Scotland? Because they can dig holes, they can lay pipes, they can lay trenches. We can do that as part of our general infrastructure because we need to do it, and how can they support us and fund us? So at the moment, we are pushing, we've not had that first round table, we've just got to the point where everyone has agreed to sit round a table and have that conversation. But my understanding is from the 5G Centre, the chair, Julie Snell, is very keen to get a case study, not a business case study, but actually get together to then allow that to be rolled out. And it's about where, and certainly we would be hoping to share that to all rural areas. You know, here's the companies that we had, this is how we did it. But it's very much slowing down some of the things I want to do, because my reliance on 4G I want to use AI sensors on the vehicles that I'm using in order to provide sort of bigger data, which will then support autonomous vehicles in the future in the rural connectivity potentially. But yeah.
Thanks, Wendy. Just for those that aren't familiar with the term R100, it's Reach 100, a Scottish Government programme about originally guaranteeing broadband to every nook and cranny in Scotland. And without tempting fate here, a certain MSP said he would resign if that didn't happen, but it isn't going to happen. And there was a legal challenge that got dropped earlier this week. So actually, finally, the R100 can progress. So obviously digital connectivity, massive. And on that subject, if Alex doesn't put it in the chat, I will. The convention, we are having a session about connectivity, and we have the 5G Centre coming along to talk about these issues, because they are really important to what we all want to do and achieve and succeed with. So Wendy, they were fairly obvious in saying that they are looking for case studies to develop. So hopefully they won't necessarily have it for the convention, but they may use people that we have in the community through SRITC to help build that. So I have to say, we've got Rabina, who's joined us from Shetland for the first time. I've seen her just come in, and Charlie Hamilton, who I'm guessing is south of the border, Charlie, at the moment, or are you sitting in somewhere really sunny and exotic? He's not unmuted. So I'll take the fact that he's probably sitting in England somewhere. Right, I'm going to throw to Fergus, because he did ask a question in the chat box. Fergus.
Yeah, hi, thanks Jenny. Good morning, everyone. I don't think I've spoken to most of you before. I'm relatively new to Scotland, having moved to Edinburgh back in March, but I've been working on various projects around sustainable transport for about 10 years. I'm currently working with Senex. So for those of you who haven't come across Senex before, we started out as the UK Centre of Excellence for Low Carbon Vehicles and Fuel Cell Technologies. We were set up by the UK government in 2005, and we're now a not-for-profit, completely independent organisation that specialises in research and delivery around low-carbon mobility and energy systems. And one of the things I'm working on at the moment is a project working with Como in Scotland, and their position is basically, you know, they have a really good understanding of what makes successful shared mobility schemes in urban areas. But then when you start to look at rural communities and the diverse communities that you have across Scotland, across the Highlands and the Islands. You know, how do we sort of create the conditions for a successful shared transport scheme, specifically where it's led by a local community group, which is why I was really interested in Maggie's car scheme up in the Cairngorms. You know, obviously we're aware of the challenges around demographics, you know, around car dependency, you know, the relatively long distances that need to be covered in some of those communities. So it's a case of, you know, if you've got a small community group that is potentially interested in some form of shared transport, be that e-bikes, be that car club, how do we help them understand, you know, whether that's going to be viable, how to get it off the ground, how to access information, funding, all that sort of stuff. So we're really keen to hear both from successful schemes that have got off the ground, and potentially if anyone's aware of communities that have looked into this and haven't been able to progress it for whatever reason, then that would be useful as well, and maybe we can offer them some guidance and support. Ultimately, what Como want to do with this is to then develop some sort of tool that's made available to community organisations, so they can establish some factors around how people are currently travelling in the community, what access they have to public transport, what the journey demand is, and use this tool to scope out what a scheme might look like. So, you know, what type of mode they ought to be going for, you know, how many vehicles, charge points, where they can access funding, support, etc. So yeah, any and all information that that people can share around that would be extremely useful.
If anybody wants to share that just now with stories, Marion from Como is here on the call as well, or you can put it into the chat, whichever, if anybody wants to jump in just now before I throw to Marion. Anybody jumping in? Marion, your turn. Unmute. That's why I suggested, I don't know if you're at the beginning, but if you all unmute, then it's easier. Just make sure you don't have the washing machine like I do going 100 miles an hour in the background. Marion's not managing to unmute, I don't think. Yeah, there she is.
Really sorry, it's so long since I've been on Zoom. I've been on Teams, I'm looking in the wrong place for it. Yeah, I've just put in the chat, it'd be worth dipping into our webinar that's coming up. I can say more about that later, Jenny. I think you've got a slide later.
Yeah, no, do it just now, Marion, you're fine.
Okay. It's basically going to be sort of snapshots of various bike share schemes, ranging from a really tiny one in Dunblane with just 2 e-bikes, and how that's been set up and shared with local residents, through to a bigger scheme, Fourth Environment Link, and the first school bike share scheme. So that will be an interesting webinar. I'll put the details in the chat in a minute of you know, how you can find out about that's coming up. I'm not actually running it myself. It's run by Harriet Cross, who is our expert really on setting up bike schemes and so on. My field is more talking to planners and developers, although I'm interested in all of this, of course, which is why I'm here now. Yeah, but my role is more sort of getting everything happening from the planning end and planning for shared mobility.
Fab, thank you, Marion. I'm going to throw to Shetland in a minute.
Sorry?
I'm just about to throw to Shetland because Rabina joined us.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Because Rabina is going to be kindly one of our speakers at the convention, so she's not going to give away all her trade secrets just now, but it ties in quite well, because I know from conversations with Rabina that shared mobility and e-bikes and things are something that's on her radar. So I'll let her introduce herself and also what's happening briefly, Rabina, in Shetland.
So I'm Rabina Barton. I'm the Transport Policy and Projects Officer for Shetland Islands Council, but also for the Regional Transport Partnership ZTrans, because it is a single local authority, RTP. And we're just working on, well, starting a new transport strategy really from scratch. We were thinking to do that in the light of the, climate change, global climate emergency, and also the new national transport strategy was a catalyst for that, and the need to tackle inequality. But in the light of COVID, it's become really clear that our strategy is not fit for purpose at all now. And of course, the importance of active travel and exploring mobility as a service and looking at different solutions to rural connectivity problems are all quite high on the agenda. So Yeah, I do feel as if there's a big change is coming, and it feels that we've got a fairly short window of opportunity in a way to try and capitalise on the changes that have resulted from, you know, the positive changes that have resulted from lockdown. As you say, that things are waning a little bit now. I suppose things are returning a little bit more to normal, and perhaps the momentum is being lost ever so slightly, but I think there's enough there to work with. Certainly in Shetland, we've been working on an active travel strategy, and we did a good engagement exercise under lockdown, which got over 400 responses online, and there definitely is an appetite for change in Shetland, and for looking at facilitating more active travel, even when that does mean less space for cars. So that's a positive thing. So it's a case of watch this space, really.
And by the time we get to October, she's going to have lots to tell you, so you're going to want to hear even more detail. But the stakeholder engagement is the crucial bit. So I'm now throwing to Greg, because he's got some information that does require stakeholder engagement, and he can share what's needing to, surveys that need to be included and can be shared by everybody here.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I put the link in the chat box there. So yeah, bus users have launched a survey today to try and capture as much feedback from people about how they feel about going back to using buses across the UK. We did a sort of Twitter poll on this, kind of loosely on this subject, well, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we got quite a lot of good feedback on that. So this is where this is kind of building on. Now people, you know, the schools are going back, more people are going back to work, and there's a bit more normality going on. So we're just keen to capture how people feel about going back to using public transport, really. So there's the links in the chat box. It's on our website, it's on Twitter, etc. So please share it, and, you know, get as many people to fill it in as possible. Because
Greg, what's your timeline on that?
I'm not actually sure, to be honest. I think it's on till the end of the month, I think, or start next month, I'm pretty
so
sure.
You might have some insights.
I think it's the dates on the website, I think, how long it's valid for. So
would you have some insights for the convention in October?
Yeah, we could do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could certainly
be good to sort of keep
feedback
that
for it for the end, no problem.
We'll share it, or you can share it at a cafe or something as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody want to start another conversation before I do one? Anybody got a burning question that they've not put in the chat box?
I'll just say on the back of the discussion with Robina is we've been in discussion with HiTrans regarding trials for the islands.
Adam, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, sorry.
Back at school, tut tut.
Adam Reed from Pedalsmart. So we manufacture zero carbon vehicles that are being introduced to the market later this year. They're four-wheel vehicles that can carry up to 350 kilos and hopefully up to 8 people in the next year or so. So we've been having discussions with HiTrans this week, and we're talking about planning trials for the islands for zero carbon. So Robina, it may be interested, excuse me, maybe good for you to have a conversation with HiTrans, or maybe we can talk offline about that and maybe some of the benefits from that facilitation with them.
So that's going to fit neatly in, because I'm going to pass to Japan, because all the modes that we're talking about at the moment, and he's smiling away at me, does fit in with rural mobility as a service. And I know Charlie's joined us because he's starting to do a PhD, so I'll come back to him after this to find out what his PhD is. But for those of you that don't know, I am obviously doing a part-time PhD on rural mobility as a service. So you'll be unsurprised to hear that one of the sessions for the convention is going to be rural mobility as a service, and Mass Scotland are supporting this as well. But obviously rural mobility, technology, connectivity, infrastructure, etc., that we've all discussed at the moment. I've talked about Japan before, and I know I bring my dear friend in quite frequently on this conversation. So I'm going to throw it open because there has been quite a bit going on. So I'll let him give you an update. But he's not going to tell you everything because he's also one of my speakers for the convention. So you're not going to give everything away just now. Off you go.
Oh God, you're making my life difficult. I will try this my best. I guess I should do the introduction first, right? Because not everyone here knows me.
Yeah.
Okay, so just before an introduction, if you see any leg, it's just because I broke my leg, so I need to have on a high position. So if you see any leg, please just forgive me. So, well, Azarel from Tokyo, nice to meet you all. I'm currently the strategic advisor for a international MPO in emerging mobility services. And currently in Japan, well, I'm currently on transition, so next month I will be in a different position, but so far I was involved in research as well as collaborating with some stakeholders here in Japan to develop mobility service. And as Jenny, I was actually doing my PhD, but in fact that time is gonna end soon, so I prefer not to talk a lot about the academic life so far. But anyway, thank you, Jenny, for the invitation to the event as well, and for the invitation to the Open Cafe, which I look forward to have more discussion on this. And for those who do not follow me on LinkedIn, I mean, normally I put a lot of news from Japan on LinkedIn, but so Japan in the last years, it has, I would say, greatly improved or greatly experiment with mobility service for rural areas. And I have a very big update that I wanted to introduce now here, but so the government is pushing forward through these kind of new technologies in order to solve the Japanese specific issues, which are mostly, as you know, depopulation. So Japan is losing population, and also aging society. So those who remain in rural areas, they are getting older, and well, this actually represents a very big issue for the transportation, from the transportation point of view, as well as other issues as well. But the thing is that since 2016, the Japanese government, they developed what they call the Society 5.0. Apparently, the Society 4.0 was something developed in Germany, so the Japanese just wanted to be one step ahead. And they start to experiment a lot with these new technologies in order to solve these society issues. So the update, well, before this, so last year, the ministry created a working group on new mobility services with a heavy focus on rural areas, but also urban areas. And they launched some sort of like public funding, some sort of like, they call it a smart mobility challenge, which is probably closer to what we call some kind of like tendering, some kind of like contest. And last year they developed 19 projects, and they evaluate them, and some of them were better than others, but they were okay. And based on that, here's where it comes the news. So this year they launched a new batch of projects, and so the list is now official. So now we know all the projects and ages involved, and it's actually available on the website. It is possible to share the screen, because I think maybe looking at map, it would be useful for the people.
Yeah. Alex will give you screen sharing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's better if we look at the map while I talk, and it's probably.
Because if anybody's like me, the geography of Japan is not phenomenal. Although somebody keeps telling me, or 3 people keep telling me I need to go to Japan, but that's not obviously going to happen anytime soon. I don't know if Alex has managed to give you the screen share.
Yeah, it should do now, Ashok. So if you try now, it should be good.
Works. Does it work now? Can you see me?
Yep.
I do not see you, so I guess you're looking at this beautiful map of Japan, are you?
Yep, indeed.
Okay, great. So, well, sorry, everything is in Japanese, but don't worry, Google Translate make a good job. And anyway, the important thing here is this table here. So these are the 38 projects that they have been awarded. And as you can see, I mean, if you know about Japan, you know that basically this part here is Tokyo. Tokyo is the largest city in the world. Depends how you count. It can be from 35 to 55 million people living. Then you have Osaka here, Nagoya, and then all the ones around here. But although it looks like most of these ones are actually urban, they are not. This is actually rural or sub-urban areas. And Japan is a very mountainous country, so that makes everything more difficult when it comes to infrastructure. So just going straight to the point, what I want to say is that they have been awarded these 38 projects, and there are some interesting things. The first one is that out of these 38, 6 of them are specifically focused on on-demand, what they call AI bus, so on-demand services. It doesn't mean they are the only ones focusing on on-demand services. There are more than that, but these are specifically testing the on-demand services for rural areas. And the other ones are very much related to payment and contentless payment. So if you look at you can actually download this brochure from the website from the ministry. But one of the very interesting things from the Japanese, from all these smart mobility challenges that the government, when they release these kind of like public applications, which they are funded up to, I think, up to 4 or 5 million, no, sorry, 40 million yens per project. I don't know how much is that in pounds. So they request evaluation methods, they request some sort of timelines. So based on those, if we met those objectives or if we don't met those, then new funding and new progression on new experiments comes up. And this is very interesting because if you look at this table here, these are the 19 projects that they were last year. It doesn't matter if you don't understand Japanese, but if you actually take your time, you may find that many of them are actually here again, and this is because they continue, because they want to scale up or experiment new features from those experiments. So I very much have a lot of expectations on this. And if you download, you can actually check every single experiment. And for example, every single experiment has their own metrics where they need to meet and how it works, what kind of people are involved, who is, and so on. So I think it is a very much interesting way to develop these projects. So the final thing I want to say is that most of these experiments are meant to be finished by at most March 21, so 2021. But because the coronavirus uncertainties, there are some buffer time that may allow, well, some timeline may change. But anyway, I think it's a very interesting way to test what does it work and what doesn't for rural areas. So.
Thank you. I'll let you stop sharing your screen. And naturally in October, there'll be more English, I think, because our Japanese might be fairly limited at that point in time. So I look forward to hearing and seeing it in more detail. But if anybody wants to ask some questions, now is the time to do so. Matt.
I was just wondering on the DRT side of things, because that's what the company I work for looks at. Do you know what sort of like technology they're using to run the DRT? Is it done sort of by, yeah, well, do you know what sort of technology they're using to run that?
Is he there? Azrul, do you know the answer?
Sorry,
what do you know what type of software technology they're using to do the demand response, the AI bus?
Yeah, but I mean, do you mean the company or?
Yeah, either the company or is it something that's sort of coming out of the government itself? Do you know how they're structuring it?
Yeah. So actually, well, it depends on the project, but if you look through the whole things, you can actually find the names of the companies. Some of them are, well, I mean, it's not secret, but every company has, of course, their own algorithms or methods and so on. But I mean, it depends on the provider, basically.
You can quiz him more in October, because otherwise this could turn into a Japanese mass cafe, which I'm sure we'd love to do, but I better make sure we spread it around, spread the love around. So I'm hoping Charlie's off mute now, because I did mention I was going to come to him later on to find out what his PhD is about and who is Charlie.
I'll go on video as well if I can get the technology to work. Hi, thanks very much for having me. So I've come here with the PhD hat on, and I'm very much looking at mass transit in small to medium-sized cities. So not rural, not Scotland, so apologies. But I'm very much looking at sort of integrated transport in small to medium-sized cities. A medium, I stick London in the world of medium-sized cities. So I think mega cities such as sort of Delhi, Santiago, places like that, I'm not getting in the mix for. But I'd say sort of London, Paris, Milan, places like that, I would class now as a medium-sized city. I think you go back to 1990, New York and London were 1 and 2 on the global index of big cities. Now they're sort of in the high teens and 20s. So that's sort of one thing. I'm also a trustee of Campaign for Better Transport as well. So that's quite interesting for me, and why another sort of reason why I'm sort of here is a lot of the work we're doing is around rural transport poverty, and how we can sort of support that. Many of you may have seen the new acceleration unit. We're losing our chief exec. He's off to that. So some of the board members, we're getting a bit more involved, and so I thought I'd better come and brush up. And then on the Scotland thing, what's interesting is I'm leading the Transport Scotland COVID bus response grant. So some of you may have seen there's a COVID response grant. Deloitte are running that, and I'm the engagement director on that. So that's, so I'm coming here with sort of 3 hats on, really. I hope that's all right.
As John Yellowlees has said, surely the acceleration unit is part of the blame culture led by Dominic Cummings. Do you want to actually provide context to both those in the UK and out with on the acceleration unit?
So from what I understand on it, it's basically a sort of ninja squad of people that report directly to the Secretary of State that are just going to go and look at how can they speed things up, where are the sort of the pinch points and the dramas, and where should the Secretary of State be putting his efforts, because there's so much going on, there's so many plans, so many ambitions. They've got to be a bit sort of targeted with their approach. So that's how I've seen it. I don't see it as a blame culture. I see it more as an enabler and actually them trying to do something. It's interesting, the team that they've chosen. So they've gone for a charity consumer advocate lead, but then with a load of sort of MACE, Highways England folk to support, which tells me that they are predominantly probably going to be looking at big infrastructure programs and rail and things like that. But hopefully Darren can sort of steer the ship a little bit more towards things that can have a quicker impact on sort of the passenger transport and rural transport poverty and things like that. So that's where I see them, and when I've spoken with DFT, that's how I've interpreted what they're going to be doing. But I think when the team gets set up next month and stand up, it will be really interesting to see what they come out with and what their priorities and focuses are for their first sort of few months.
Sadly, I don't think rural will be on their agenda, but it would be nice if it was, because there is that growing deurbanisation trend at the moment where people are moving to the rural areas, and therefore it actually is going to become even more of a bigger pinch point.
And also with the levelling up agenda, you know, the government have come up with decarbonisation and levelling up. The only way to sort of decarbonise the sort of rural environment is get people out of their cars, levelling up. People can't afford to live in cities, so they live out in the rural communities. They can't then get to the jobs and employment hubs. So the social inequality that is driven by the lack of rural transport is front and centre of people like Stephen Fiddler at DFT. I know it's something he's mindful of. So it's just about raising that profile and making sure that they are aware of the dramas and the knock-on effects. With increased urbanisation and everyone moving towards the cities, COVID is a bit of an interesting one, because people say that everything's going to change forever and isn't this going to be great? I'm kind of a skeptic on that, because after 9/11, everybody said, oh, we're never going to fly again. Passenger planes, oh, no one's going to fly. We're going to come up with new technologies and we're not going to do it. And all of a sudden, 5 weeks after 9/11, we're at sort of pre-9/11 flights. You look in places like China and Shenzhen, and they're up to sort of 90% pre-COVID levels on their public transport systems already. So I don't see it happening at the scale of which some people are reporting it to be, or predicting it to be. But I can see a lot of sort of maybe top 10, 15% of earners who can afford to move out and remote work and have that flexibility. But actually, there's very few industries where you can have that complete remote working. We look at sort of lab work in biosciences or life sciences in sort of Cambridge, Oxford. You look at manufacturing. You look at construction. That can't really happen. So it's going to be an interesting sort of 12 months. I don't see it being as radical as some people predict.
The strand I'm holding on to is that people have had to work together. So there's been a bit of a breakdown in the siloed approach. I'm not saying it's gone at all, but we're starting to break that down. So if we can have that as a bit of a legacy, then that's got to be something better than nothing. I do have the crystal ball, as you can see in my background, but unfortunately, like a genie bottle, if you rub it, it doesn't give you the answer to what's going to happen. But the COVID side of things, we often share stories on the cafes of what people are doing locally and more internationally. And I think the fact that people have the aspiration and hope for change means that we might get some form of change. It might not just be the level of change that we all want. Without dominating the conversation too much, I would be interested to know about your transport poverty work, because obviously that underpins a lot of what we're all interested in because of the inequalities and the opportunities that lie within that.
So we've written a few reports, and we've done some work with local councils around how they can level up and identifying spots. But that's pretty much now. We had our board meeting on Monday, and it was the first one after the first proper meeting after Darren's resignation. And it was at that point then that the board realised, okay, we all need to step up a little bit, because there's probably going to be an interim gap where we don't have a chief exec, and a few of us need to sort of get in the mix and provide a bit more support and hands-on oversight for the organisation. So I'm learning pretty quickly. Generally, I've been focusing on the sort of the treasury side and the financial sides of the business, but I am now picking up a bit more of our policy work. So I can share it with you. I will come back to the group and I will dig out what we've got and share it with you, because we've written quite a lot on it, but
right,
I'm no
I'll hold you
expert
to
yet.
that, because that means you can open up the next open cafe, assuming that we're going to keep these going, because I was going to, until the end of the year. So that's your to-do list. That's an action.
I'm writing it down now.
And just
Otherwise I'll
personally,
forget.
which university are you doing your PhD through?
Cambridge.
Okay. Well, you're going to have lots of updates for us on that as well over the next wee while. So we can have an offline conversation about PhDs, but I'm going to throw it open before we conclude, because I'm sure we could all chat about rural mobility for every hour of every day, but I realise it's been 45 minutes. Anybody got another burning question that they want to discuss, or something that they want to bring up?
I don't know if it's burning, Jenny, but I was just thinking in the context of the growth of home working and location neutral roles. I think that, you know, probably one of the big issues there's been in terms of rural mobility has been, you know, decision making, strategy, policy, and it being quite centralised at times in a kind of Scottish context. And you know, we've had that with various organisations. CalMac, there were concerns about you know, some of the decisions being made, for example, in Gourock and not necessarily in rural areas themselves. And it's just how big an opportunity this is to actually see more of those jobs, a lot of jobs which can be done remotely or in location neutral roles, actually be implemented as such, if you like, offer those positions as being location neutral, and hopefully get a bit more diversity in the decision making than we've kind of currently got. And I think there is a big opportunity there. I'm just not sure how many of those organisations are keen to take advantage of that, if you like. And it will be interesting to see, and I hope we do.
From what I know, pre-COVID, there was definitely a number of RTPs, which will remain nameless, that were trying to champion Transport Scotland to make sure that it didn't need to always be Edinburgh and Glasgow for if you lived in the south or the north of an RTP, that it might be worthwhile that there was more distribution of staff. So that was desires pre-COVID, and I don't have them on the call at the moment, but I know the Scottish Government Islands team, for example, they are very well distributed. So it would be nice to see, wouldn't it? And it would be great for the local economies as well.
And I think the other thing that's come up recently, Alex alluded to it, I think Alex posted about it the other day, was kind of travel tech for Scotland as well, which is an initiative. I think it's, you know, for some people may be aware that FinTech Scotland exists, and it's trying to do something similar. There are a lot of differences, of course, in terms of kind of travel tech and FinTech in terms of the history, the amount.
Do you want to just quickly give a travel tech background, because some people won't know, just very quickly?
Yes, sorry, essentially I'm actually part of a kind of data and technology group for tourism, as it were, but one of the things that there's a feeling there's been lacking in Scotland for some time is a kind of coordination around travel technology in Scotland, and it is this particular focused travel technology for Scotland is more around the tourism side, although it's not trying to be transport is such, although of course we're aware there is kind of crossover. Being honest, I think that, you know, what's there at the moment is fairly diluted. I think that you know, there's still a lot to be done in that space, and it's under-invested in at present. So we're going to look, it's very early days. Let's hope that it's a starting point from which to build. But even then, there has been a tendency in the tourism space for a lot of decision making to be maybe centred and focused around Edinburgh, South East. This is funded by Scottish Enterprise, for example, Edinburgh University, and involved. And I think it's important for to ensure that it's a bit more diverse than that as well, for it to be as effective as it could and it should be. So I'd say that's very early days. That's just pretty much the last week, and they only had first call the other day. So but yeah, let's hope we can build on it.
Tourism is definitely one of the features. I just see Charlie's put where the reports are in the chat. Alex, do you just want to do a quick summary of some of the broadband tech side of things that you shared in the chat and also on the LinkedIn group before we conclude?
Yeah, just again briefly. So yeah, we all know what the challenges are when it comes to connectivity. I suppose the good news in some ways that there are organisations out there trying to tackle that using different types of technology. So I'm sitting here in Arran at the moment, and much like lots of locations, until recently really suffered badly in terms of really, really poor broadband. So you now have this company called Broadway Broadband who are rolling out broadband in different rural locations. Arran was one of the first sort of test locations, and they're using TV white space rather than traditional broadband in terms of copper or fibre. So that gets round some of these cost issues in terms of getting broadband into property or off the beaten track, so to speak. It's not a perfect solution because you have to have kind of line of sight between the property and a mast because it's done over the air, but certainly changing this dynamic in the communities they're starting to roll it out in, because suddenly where previously you had 2 meg on a good day, you get 50 meg, so that's somewhat transformative both from a personal and a business standpoint. So I think that's the type of thing we need to be lobbying and making sure that, moving forward, that all options are on the table in terms of the type of tech that is potentially usable in filling some of the gaps.
Fab. That links quite neatly on to my next slide. What's happening next? What's going to go into your diary that you haven't had billions of emails from me about? Well, next week is the start of the joint sessions with Mamba. So Mamba is a European project, lots of real world rural projects, and they're just coming to a close. They were meant to have their conference in June. So I'm a bit gutted because I was going to be flying out there to present. So instead I'm sitting in my office to present next week. So it's 9 to 10:30. SRITC is supporting it. So it's that hour and a half on the 3rd, 10th and the 17th of September. Alex, I put the links here, but he's already put them in the chat at the very top. So you can go and register to listen to what they've got, or you can see the agenda at this link as well for what they're going to be covering. Really interesting projects covering everything from DRT all the way through to hitchhiking, to car sharing, to, one could say, all the components of mobility as a service. So check that out. As Marion's already said, they've got their webinar on the 29th of September for an hour about peddling green power, peddling green recovery, sorry. She's given you the link, but we'll also put the link into an email that we will send out. I'm going to be biased and say most importantly is the convention, and I'm really lucky to say that I've got quite a lot of the speakers here today. So on the Friday, on the Monday, put my teeth back in. On the Wednesday, we are going to be looking at islands, connectivity, infrastructure, technology. So a real rounded focus. And then on the Friday, we're going to be looking at mobility hubs and rural mobility as a service. And I have to say, I feel really achieved for finishing the week. As you will know, I've tried to facilitate and successfully achieved Japan, Australia, America, and Scotland, all joining us for the Rural Mass session live. But I've even managed to get them all to come together for a conference call next week. And the one time zone is 12 o'clock UK, 10 o'clock Melbourne. Azrael, I think you're 6 o'clock at night. And Dwight, who's not joined us today in America, is yet again getting up early for 6 o'clock in the morning. So there's lots going on. We're going to structure it as 2 sessions. It won't be death by PowerPoint, as you can imagine. Jenny doesn't do that. There'll be lots of discussion to be had. We're going to have a workshop on each day and plenty of breaks, but the breaks might be slightly unconventional in a usual Jenny fashion. So you might want to have your gym shoes on, is all I'm going to say. We're also going to keep these chat cafes going. I really welcome your feedback because this is the first time we've done it. We did ask you in a survey if people were interested in it, just an opportunity to share what you're doing, moan about what you need to do, and just be a bit of a support there so we can keep the rural communities and everybody together. We are going to be doing our regular cafes, but obviously need to wait until the 3 Mamba series have gone. So we're looking at the end of September, and I will be publishing what the case studies will be and who's going to be speaking from September until Christmas time. Nearly there. Remember the website. If you missed something, it's usually on the website, or you can get access to these cafes. Quick question, I haven't got a poll facility in front of me, so a show of hands might do, or something in the chat. Should we record these open cafes and share them for other people that haven't managed to join us, or should we not distribute them? What do you think? James has got thumbs up. Rennie's shrugging. Gordon's thumbs up. Adam, John, I can't see your hand, but I'll take that as a thumbs up. Rabina, what do you think? Yeah, okay, useful. I'm just going through as you're on my screen. Fergus, okay. Graham, useful. Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, so we'll get that put up online for those that haven't managed to come along. And last but not least, we're looking at the structure and how we go forward with SRITC. So we are going to be putting together some offerings for people so you can help support us in some capacity going forward and become a partner. So there will be information on that going forward, because as you know, I dedicate my time to this totally free. So does Alex, and so do many of the musketeers behind the scenes. But we're starting to incur costs left, right and centre. So if people are able to help us out, that would be really appreciated. Alex has put in the chat box the Eventbrite link if you haven't already signed up for the convention, so please do that. Rennie, the Mamba sessions I think are going to be recorded. Which one are you going to miss?
Trying to remember now. Just check my diary. I'm going to miss some of next week's.
That's all right. You'll have heard me speak before, so you'll be fine. You don't need to worry about it.
And I missed the last one because I'll be on holiday.
Okay. Well, check out the agenda online, and if there's anything in particular or anyone in particular you want to speak to, then let me know. The project does conclude completely from a European Union point of view at the end of the month, but I know pretty much all the stakeholders involved. So if there's somebody of any you want to speak to, just let me know. Right, I think that's all I've got to share with you. If there's anybody that wants to add anything else in, please shout now. Unmute yourself and shout, but not at me. No, that's good. That means I can go and get another cup of coffee. Thank you very much for joining us. Please do email me and let me know, but I think on the basis that you want this recorded and there was thumbs up, that you enjoyed this informal gathering. And if you're not going to be able to make the next one, but have a burning desire to have something discussed or shared, then drop me an email. But otherwise, I'll love you and leave you. Enjoy your Friday and your Saturday and your Sunday, and see you in September.
Thanks.
Bye.
Very much, Jenny. Cheers.
Thanks, Jenny. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Adam, I'll just wait you to sign out. And it's just you and me, Alex.
If you become a host, can you stop recording? Because bizarrely enough, I am not the host anymore.
Have
you become the host? Can you
stop recording? Yeah.
Yeah, what happens if you stop recording?